Alright, welcome back to J-Face Games. Let's talk about Dragonbane. Okay, in my last video, I did a really quick read of the rules and tried to pick out things as I saw them. That was a good kind of intro to the game, but once I actually saw the details of the game, it came together a bit more for me. There was more sort of nuance there than I actually realized. I was also able to get a single encounter playtest in, and that was also kind of allowed me to understand the game a bit more, so let's go over it again, alright? So first, character design. There are some interesting choices in character design. First off, there are wonderful charts if you ever want to just randomize everything. You can really just roll on your kin, class, age, starting equipment stats, everything. It doesn't take too long, so let's kind of go through that real fast. You first come here and you can randomize your kin, which is just a d12, and then you're going to come down and randomize your profession, and there's another chart for that. Your profession and your kin are kind of going to give you an idea of what should your primary stat be. Next, you're going to randomize your 6 stats. These stats are strength, agility, willpower, constitution, intelligence, and charisma. And then you're going to roll for your age. So now, when you're doing your stats are going to be your traditional 4d6 minus the lowest, and then you keep them. And they have to go in the slot that you rolled. So you start with strength and you work your way down. At the end, you can switch to, and then you're going to add your age modifiers, which might give you some plus to constitution and agility if you're young, etc. There's some tough choices here, actually, because all the stats are pretty damn useful. So strength is your melee prowess, agility is your ranged prowess, constitution is your total hit points, willpower is your total willpower points, which sort of act as your action pool or your resource pool. Intelligence has a lot of skills associated with it that are incredibly important. And then charisma is pretty much all of your social interaction abilities, right? So all 6 of those are very valuable. Once you've made these decisions, you can then roll for a ton of other things that you're starting with, right? Your starting equipment, your name, your nickname, a memento item, etc. There's so much flavor in all these charts, and you can really whip up a character sheet super quick. The only problem I had doing it for our playtest was that there wasn't a fillable character sheet that I could use. Otherwise, it was very fast to create a pretty evocative character. Let's really quickly kind of talk about gear. So I cruised through this gear section previously, but the equipment's actually really interesting. In terms of, for instance, how the character sheet works. Let me pull up the character sheet. Okay, so here's the character sheet. And what's interesting is how the character sheet interacts with the concept of encumbrance and your actions, right? So they break up everything into sections. You have, in essence, what's going to be at hand, which is going to be down here, your actual sort of items, your weapons. Let me scroll down a little bit. They're weapons. You're going to have your tiny items, and you're going to have your inventory over here. So at hand versus inventory indicates if something is readily available to you. If it's at hand, you don't have to switch it up. So there's no worrying about, oh, I've got to pull this out and sheath this and put this away and, quick draw and other abilities. They don't count towards your encumbrance also. So anything that's at hand isn't counting towards your, I can't carry enough. Inventory items, which are over here, those actually count towards your encumbrance. And you can carry as many items in here as half of what your total strength is. So if your strength is 12, you can carry 6 items, right? Easy. Tiny items don't count towards anything. You can hold as many tiny items as you want, and they're all readily available. It's almost like things that are in your, I think a knife technically can count as a tiny item. When it comes to weapons, you have these 3 slots, and what these are is that different items have different sort of weight to them. So a heavy weapon takes up 2 slots. A shield actually goes down here and takes up 1 slot. And those are the things you can quickly switch between. A bow technically would fit in here, any ranged weapons, etc. So everything has a place. And by filling it out, it lets you know what you can do. And if it's in your inventory area, it means that you have to spend time digging into it, versus if it's not, you can just use it right away. That's just clean to me. I like that. All right. Let's get into combat. So it uses an initiative card-based, or it used card-based initiative. But there was a lot more to it than I originally understood. So you have these cards, right? And these aren't the real cards, but you have a deck of cards, 1 to 10, right? You're going to shuffle these up at the beginning of every round, and you're going to dish out a card to everybody. Now, groups of people, like if you have a group of low-level goblins, they can just take 1 card for that whole group to interact with. But whoever has the lowest card is going to go first, and whoever has the highest card is going to go last, and you work your way up. The nuance comes from any time you want, you can perform a wait action on your turn. So if it's my turn, I can perform this wait action, and what I do is I get to trade my card with any other card that's higher than me. That could be a player or an NPC/monster. So in essence, you delay your turn, but you're also getting someone to go earlier, right? So this is a way that it's interesting, because this is a way then you could get a tank to go first, or the rogue maybe to go first, or you could bring up your healer so they could heal someone and get them back to life or buff them so that they can now take their action. But you can also have an enemy go first. You could delay your turn and let an enemy go, but why would you actually want to do that? Well, before we get into why you'd want to do that, there's a nuance here, right? Depends on who you're fighting. So there are NPCs and there are monsters. And in this game, this is where I got kind of tripped up previously in terms of understanding the rules, because these are very different. NPCs are humanoids, right? These are your orcs, goblins, skeletons, things like that. Not all humanoids, but that's what kind of I've seen. In other games, these would just be considered monsters. But in this game, monsters are things that are more extreme in nature. Demons, dragons, trolls, big stuff. A warg rider, so an orc on top of a warg. But why is there this distinction? And mainly the distinction is that monsters are way harder. They are awful. So there are two defenses in this game. Two different defensive actions that a player can take. And this is feeding into this, okay? So you can take on your turn a dodge or a parry action. Or you can take it on someone else's turn as a reaction. So that's when you're going to take it. Parrying, you can use your weapon, in essence, your weapon skill, to try to deflect damage away from you. And the only thing it might cost is you don't take any damage, but you're going to maybe hurt your weapon a little bit. And dodging, you jump out of the way completely. Both of these, now dodging, you're going to use your evasion skill, and you're not going to take any damage. Both of these are considered reactions, which means that you would use up your entire action and movement if you did these. So in order to do these, you still need your action and your movement. So going back to initiative, I might want the goblin to go before me, because now if it hits me, I have a choice to either dodge it or parry it, or I could take the damage and still have my action. Dodging would mean I wouldn't do anything else this turn, but hey, the initiative happens so fast and these cards get dealt that, and because turns are just action move, it's going to happen real quick, right? And so now the next turn might have a different tactical layout where I've got a friend with me. However, monsters. If you're up against a monster, holy crap. Not only does you can't parry a monster, but they also automatically hit. So they're not rolling to see if they hit, which is wild. So let's recap. NPCs, which are humanoid-ish creatures, they act just like you. They have skills. They are trying to attack you. They swing and they can possibly miss. They have opportunity attacks if you try to move away from them. And if they move away from you, you have an opportunity attack against them. Monsters, they break all these rules. You don't get opportunity attacks against them. You can't parry them. And they automatically hit on all the attacks, which is brutal. Here are some potential monsters. So a dragon would be more considered a monster. And they have specific monster attacks. We'll talk about those in a second. The one thing that I have not found in this book that would be very useful is an encounter builder of some sort. They have at the very end this adventure generating chart that seems to show that in a given, I assume, a nightly session, it's right here, you might have something like 4 to 12 NPCs that you're dealing with, or one monster and one powerful NPC monster. That probably gives you an idea of how to scale things, but it doesn't really tell you how many players are involved in these encounters. So maybe this is the player count on the left. I don't think so. But this could be, it might be easier if they had an encounter builder. Another note is that monsters don't have actions. I showed a chart a second ago. Or, I'm sorry, they don't have normal actions. They don't act like NPCs. They don't have your basic damage dice and your skills. They automatically hit. So instead, they have these charts that are numbered 1 to 6, and you as a DM are going to choose potentially, here's one, you're going to choose either which attacks happen or you're going to roll for it. The interesting thing is that the monsters aren't going to have, they can't do the same attack twice in a row, so you have to switch it up, right? These makes them really cool, really thematically cool, because the actions are always kind of changing and they're kind of crazy. Also, they have something called ferocity. So here's ferocity 2. What ferocity means is this determines how many initiative cards they actually get. That's right, a monster might have something from 2 to 3 turns that it's taking, with each turn actually getting a movement and an action. what's interesting is that when you actually perform the wait action on your turn, so all the initiative cards get dealt out, this vampiric bat swarm or whatever it is gets 2 cards because it has ferocity 2. If you want to wait and let them go before you, you choose which of their cards is going to come forward. They still have their other one. So it looks really fun. I think this part looks really cool. So what do players now have at their disposal? Well, let's talk about actions, and to be honest, let's talk about death. So here's a chart, and you have the normal sort of actions you'd expect in sort of these kind of games, right? You can attack, you can range attack, you can dash and get more movement, you can help someone, you can pick a lock, open the door, cast a spell, etc. We also already mentioned that you could dodge or you could parry, but the other ones I think that are really interesting are round rest and rally. Okay, round rest is a way to get back a d6 willpower. So we already talked about willpower being this sort of resource, and you can see it here, as down here it's a resource just like health, that's going to be activating your heroic abilities and your spells. So anytime you cast a spell or use heroic ability, you're burning willpower. And you probably only have a max of maybe 10 to 15 willpower, because it's the equivalent of your willpower stat attribute. And this is a way, this round rest is a way for you as a caster or a melee to still be able to be viable in combat, to try and eke out a couple more spells or a couple more heroic actions by resting and getting some of your willpower back. It's really cool. There's also a really cool concept in there that you can take this and actually hurt yourself more and get a d4 more willpower, but at the expense of a d4 hit points. So you're really pushing yourself. There's a risk reward there, right? Rally is wild to me. So if you ever get to 0 HP, you are down and you are dying, but you aren't unconscious. You have the death saves you have to make, like in 5th edition. You have 3 fails, you die, 3 successes, you save, and you get back up and get like a d6 hit points. But there's this rally action that a friend can take on you, or you can take yourself. If a friend does it, they're trying to persuade you. They take a persuasion check to try and get you up. If you take it, you're taking a Bane or disadvantaged willpower check. If successful, you're back on your feet and you're fighting like normal, but you're still making death saves because you're still dying. You're still bleeding out every turn. And if you're hit by an attack during this, when you're staggering around up, you take a death save fail, not damage. You're really testing the fates here to see if you can win this fight, but you might really die for real. I love this because it's the idea of, you have in other games like Orcs in 5th edition where you kill them and they get one last attack, and it's supposed to show this like they fight until there's nothing left in them. This really is that. You are really fighting and staggering, and you are killing yourself potentially. You are risking this fight. The final thing I'll mention kind of on the base mechanics that I think are interesting is there's this concept called pushing. Pushing yourself at any point in time if you fail a skill check, which a skill check is everything. That's actions, attacks, skill checks and actions. They both use the same thing, which is a skill. You're using a skill check with your weapon, right? Anytime you take a skill check and you fail, you can push yourself to roll a second time, and you would then take the second result. No matter what you get on that second result, whether you succeed or fail, you are now going to take a condition. And the condition is whatever the skill was you were doing, whatever attributes associated with that, you take a condition for that. So if you were swinging your sword, you're pushing yourself with your swing, that's strength based, so now you would be exhausted, right? And that exhaustion means that you now have a Bane or disadvantage with all skill rolls associated with strength. So if you do athletics, if you do any other weapons that are melee handed. And you have that Bane until you get some sort of heal or rest. But that's it. That's the main gist of this system. I mentioned in the last video the cool sort of leveling mechanics, and there are some other cool choices you get when you get criticals and crit hits and crit fails. Like for instance, instead of just double damage, you could instead get a second attack on someone nearby. So I like those little choices. Also, the kin abilities and the heroic abilities in the magic system, we didn't talk about it in here, but those really break a lot of the rules that we've talked about above already. So overall, I personally can't wait to play around with this system a little bit more, and I'll do 2 more videos, one showing a demo and a third one saying what I'm probably going to take off and use in the pressure system. All right, see you guys.